being that this was not a good thing. In high school, I remember studying this issue and seeing photos of aborted babies and being horrified, but I didn't identify with that. I didn't think, oh, that could have been me. No, I thought it was just some sad story where she couldn't afford to keep me, but abortion doesn't apply to my life. I thought. I turn 18, I get this information, and it has to do with my very existence. And it was as if I could hear the echoes of all those people who would say, well, except in cases of rape, or especially in cases of rape. And now all those people were talking about me, about my life, and I felt like I had at least half the world against me, that there's all these people out there who don't even know me, who are standing in judgment of my life, so quick to dismiss it just because of how I was conceived. And I felt like I was now going to have to justify my own existence, that I would have to prove myself to the world that I shouldn't have been aborted and that I was worthy of living. And after a while I had it all worked out in my head that if I could just meet this certain societal standard that's out there that dictates what one's value is, if I could just make myself attractive and successful, and if I could just find that relationship where someone would love me, then I'd have value and I could feel good about myself. And I figured people could then look at me and say, oh, well, look at Rebecca, this nice, young, attractive, intelligent woman. Clearly, Rebecca shouldn't have been aborted. And then everyone would just see the light, and single-handedly, I could bring an end to abortion in this world. And thank God, I am not the savior of this world. And I couldn't even save myself. But isn't that message so prevalent in our society, that your value is based on perhaps how you were conceived, who your parents are, who likes you, how smart, how athletic, what university you attend, what you do with your life, what kind of house you live in, how much money you make. Motivational speakers go around telling people that if you could just make something of yourself, then you too could be somebody. Well, you know, not everybody has those opportunities or capabilities, and people mess up in life. And so what then? They're not somebody, or they're nobody. Or some people would tell you that your value is based upon the sum total of your successes versus your failures. And if your successes in life outweigh your failures, well then, you're a person of value and you have something to offer this world. But if your failures outweigh your successes, if you've just messed up too many times in your life, or if your burdens outweigh your benefits, then in the ledger sheet of life, you're a liability. And you're either not worth as much as everybody else, or you're disposable. And I guess I had really bought into that lie. And I wanted to have all of my assets lined up so people could look at me and see me as being a person of value at a time in my life when I felt like I was being devalued every day. And isn't that why so many young women choose abortion? Because they think that somehow that their life is not going to be worth as much if they have this child out of wedlock, that it would be seen as a failure, or they couldn't be as marketable for marriage in the future, or they couldn't get their college degree in just the right amount of time. And they buy into abortion as being their solution because they want to stay in the rat race and be a person of value. I understand what it's like to feel that way. I ended up settling in relationships like I should be thankful that somebody would want to be with somebody like me. I jumped into relationships, so after a short amount of time and a few intense conversations, a guy was telling me that I was the most amazing girl that he'd ever met. I'd take him in his word because I wanted so much to believe that that was true. I wanted to know that somebody else could see me that way. I wanted to know that I was someone who was lovable. And I just had this huge hole in my heart that I desperately wanted filled. Those relationships became very controlling. So again, after a short amount of time, if a guy was calling me and say, oh, cancel your plans with their family or friends, come see me, I just want to be with you, I miss you. Wow, that sounded so good at the time, but I realized that over time, I was allowing myself to become more and more alienated from my family and friends, isolated and dependent upon him for my emotional well-being. And those relationships became very abusive, until ultimately I was beat up by a boyfriend from law school. He broke my jaw, my front tooth was hanging, I had to have all kinds of surgery to have it put back in, root canal, more surgery to try to save it. I was told I could still end up losing my front tooth someday, and after 13 years I had to have it pulled, which again was devastating. But I was speaking at a banquet down in Alabama, and an expert in cosmetic dentistry came up to me afterwards and offered to do all of my teeth for free. And not just the 3 with the bridge and 4th to match, but 8 teeth with porcelain veneers. So, and that was actually part of the Give Back a Smile program for victims of domestic violence. And I share that story with you because it's another example where there was something in my life, something that happened that was really, really awful. But then something beautiful came out of it. And isn't that what God is famous for? The worst evil that man has in store, God can take and use it for good, for his glory. It's the story of Joseph in Egypt. What man meant for evil, God can use for good. And it's the story of our Savior. Now I'm very thankful for this nice new set of teeth, but let me make one thing clear. That does not make me pro-domestic violence. Just like being thankful for my life does not make me pro-rape. But people actually say that to me. Like a lot of people, especially when I speak on university campuses during Q&A, they'll say, oh, so what you're saying is if abortion had been legal, then you wouldn't be here today. Well, you know, if your birth mother hadn't been raped, you wouldn't be here today either. So does that mean that you're pro-rape? People actually say that to me. And I explain to them that there's a huge moral difference because I did exist and my life would have been ended because I would have been killed through a brutal abortion. You can only be killed if you already exist. And that is a huge moral difference. Let me have, how much time do I have? Okay. I'm going to keep track of where the clock is. Now, at the time that I'd been beat up, I had really hit rock bottom. From all outward appearances, I had so much going for me. I excelled in academics and athletics. I was attending a great law school, but I was totally deteriorating on the inside over this whole issue of value. And that is when God called me back to him. The first time I'd ever heard the message of the gospel, I was 15. Up to that point, I'd had lots of friends who invited me to church over the years, but my takeaway was always that I never understood why I couldn't go up and have crackers and juice with everyone else. Because no one ever shared their faith with me. They just thought it was cool to invite their little Jewish friend to church with them. And then I had a friend who invited me to hear a special youth speaker who laid out the message of the gospel. Now, I had never heard this before. Trust me, Jesus is not a popular subject in a Jewish household. And I was amazed, and I knew that this was truth, and I believed that night. And, you know, the other thing, growing up in a Jewish household, it was so confusing because, you know, I'd hear, like, about Santa Claus all the time, and, like, not to give it away for any of you or anything, but my parents didn't want to spoil it for my friends' kids, and so I'd ask them, like, you know, I mean, I'd seen all the movies, I knew the songs, and, you know, Santa didn't come to our house, so I'd ask my parents, and they'd say, well, you know, he doesn't come to our house, you know, because we're Jewish. Well, I also grew up learning about the Nazis and how, you know, they hated Jews, and, like, apparently Santa Claus didn't like Jewish kids either. Yeah. And that was tied into Christianity. So, I mean, the whole thing was very confusing, and then the Easter Bunny and everything. And so then I heard what Jesus was really all about for that first time, and it was like, oh, okay, now it all makes sense. But basically, after 9 months, I no longer had a ride, and my Jewish parents were not about to drive me. So So I ended up spending some of the toughest years of my life away from God, away from church, on my